Welcome to our first webinar and in-person event simultaneously. I want to thank those who are attending virtually and those who agreed to come out and join us this frosty morning. And we're going to get right down to business. We have an extremely tightly scripted event. This morning, you're going to hear from 11 executives who will be sharing an overview of 2021, primarily just to tee up their forecast for the year ahead. Each speaker is given the same tools and 8 minutes to make their point, and in 3 PowerPoint slides. And when all presentations are complete, we actually will be opening this up to a Q&A session. For those in the room, please write down your question on a question slip in the middle of the table. Those in the webinar, please submit your question in the group chat. Regardless of where you are, please let us know to whom you are addressing the question. We don't take a question and ask everyone on the panel the same question. And with that, we're going to kick it off with our first speaker. From changes in tax laws to the pandemic, the nonprofit community has faced unusually difficult challenges in the past 2 years. Here to share with us how nonprofits are faring under the added duress is Kathleen Reardon. Kathleen is CEO of the New Hampshire Center for Nonprofits. Please welcome to the stage, Kathleen Reardon. Kathleen.
Good morning, all. Thank you, Heidi. It's a pleasure to be here this morning to be able to talk about the nonprofit sector and how we are faring. I'd say, if anything, over the last 2 years, it has reminded us of how important nonprofits are to our lives. They were all on the front lines helping us with our health and managing the public health crisis, responding to increased needs for food and housing assistance, and providing hope and inspiration through the arts and natural environment. As the US reckoned with racial inequality and social injustice, nonprofits across New Hampshire have embraced and are addressing these issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion with increased urgency and commitment. If there's one word to describe the nonprofit sector over the past couple of years, I would say that is resilience. Well, actually, I'm going to give you 2 words, and adaptation. New Hampshire nonprofits adapted quickly, meeting community needs, and are positioned to foster a stronger economic recovery for all Granite Staters. As Heidi mentioned, the pandemic and ensuing economic crisis impacted nonprofits of all types and sizes. And early on, we saw organizations who earn their income primarily through earned income, such as ticket sales, events, rental income. They were particularly hard hit, and we continue to see them have challenges as we all determine whether we want to gather again and what is appropriate from that perspective. When the center surveyed nonprofits about a year after the pandemic, nearly half reported a decrease in total revenue compared to pre-pandemic revenues. Relief funding from both government sources and private philanthropy were critical to enable nonprofits to keep their doors open and deliver upon their missions. On average, pandemic-related relief funds made up 20% of organizations' revenue. So this was really critical for us in keeping our doors open and keeping to deliver on the missions. That flexible, despite all of these challenges, many nonprofits increased their impact. 26% of organizations increased the number of constituents they served over the past couple of years. And 21% are experiencing growth in their programs, again, to respond to the needs of our communities. As we look forward, flexible aid awarded to the state, county, and municipal governments through the American Rescue Plan Act will provide opportunities for strategic and collaborative investments to support our economic recovery and have a lasting impact in our communities. Nonprofits are positioned to maximize public benefits with their deep knowledge of community needs, reach, and existing relationships, particularly in low income and underserved or hard to reach populations. Moving on, one of the things we often talk about is charitable giving trends, because that is so vital to nonprofits' operations. National studies continue to show an increase in total overall charitable giving, and the strength of the stock market at the end of the year is expected to result in robust year-end giving. Those data points are not available yet. But yet these headlines mask some ongoing concerns that, for those of you who have been here previously, we've talked about. One of those things is the share of Americans who give to charity is at an all-time low. In 2018, it was less than, in 2020, it dipped to less than half of American households. As recently as 2000, that was 66%. So that's a real dramatic decrease. And we're seeing that giving is concentrated amongst the very wealthy. Another thing that I would say is not all nonprofits share equally in this generosity. A greater share of small organizations saw their donations decline in 2020. So when you think about New Hampshire and the size of our organizations, again, it's a very varied picture for how organizations saw the impact. One bright spot, I would say, is in 2020, digital giving across the country increased to 21% to comprise 13% of all charitable giving. This is particularly encouraging for small organizations who tend to have a greater mix of online giving, and particularly as we are all operating in this digital world these days. Here in the Granite State, I can point to a record $3.8 million donated to nonprofits through New Hampshire Gives, which is a 24-hour online giving event that the New Hampshire Center for Nonprofits initiated and coordinates. Looking ahead, it's likely that the changes that the nonprofits have made to their business models and to adapt to community needs will have a lasting impact. Organizations are thinking differently about the way they do their works, and it will make a huge impact on the people we serve. We're building upon what we've learned, prioritizing equity and fostering stronger partnerships. Many organizations have increased their collaborations with other nonprofits as well as with governments and private businesses. Ongoing partnership and support from people like you will be so important to the future. Again, I would say the adaptability of nonprofits and the ways that they have leaned in give me great hope that nonprofits will continue to be here for our communities again and again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christine. That's the second time, Kathleen. We have a Christine employee. Sorry, she's laughing right now. But anyway, thank you, Kathleen. While all of us wish our investments would follow a straight curve upwards, just one way, Marshall, we also know that what goes up sometimes goes down. We've been very lucky in the past few years with the stock market, but here to discuss what may be on the horizon for 2022 is Marshall Rowe. Marshall is Managing Director of Northern New England for the Colony Group. They are a wealth management firm with New Hampshire headquarters in Concord, and please welcome Marshall Rowe. Marshall.
Good morning, it's great to see you, and thank you, Heidi, for inviting the Colony Group to participate in this year's FutureCast. It's always a pleasure to partner with Business New Hampshire Magazine. My topic this morning is wealth management and the capital markets as seen from New Hampshire. And I will focus on the immediate financial market picture and what we believe will be the dominant investment theme over the next decade or so. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with the Colony Group, we are a national wealth management and multifamily office. And we have offices in LA, Denver, Boston, New York, Boca Raton, Naples, Florida, and Concord. So let me begin with the current environment. After nearly 2 years of extraordinary fiscal and monetary stimulus and all-time highs in the stock market, the game has changed. I was speaking with one of my fellow speakers this morning. We were talking about PPP and how important that was to our economy. And that's an example of the really important but very generous fiscal stimulus that helped support our economy over the last 2 years, and it played a really important role. But the game has changed because fiscal stimulus is shrinking. There's no more PPP, and on a relative basis, fiscal spending, government spending, is decreasing relative to prior years. Monetary stimulus has also weakened and is about to become restrictive. That's the big deal for the financial markets. And both are contributing to market volatility that we're currently experiencing, and it may potentially get more volatile, as in a deeper decline in the market. To be clear, the Federal Reserve is concerned about inflation, and not only the current state of inflation, but the fact that it may persist and get worse. And they can't fix this inflation problem very easily. It's complicated significantly by the supply chain issues and the continuing impact of Omicron in China and other sources of goods that come into this country. But they can fix the demand side of the problem. And the demand side is that consumers are spending a lot of the money that the government distributed as part of PPP and other stimulus programs. And that fuel is now being withdrawn. And they, on the monetary side, lowered interest rates to zero. They have been printing, literally, $120 billion a month since the beginning of the pandemic and buying securities in the financial markets, treasury bonds and mortgage-backed securities. But all of that has been stimulating to our economy. And if the Federal Reserve wants to shrink demand, meaning they want all of us to buy less, they have the tools to do that. The graphic, which I've included, the gray bars, the vertical gray bars are historically, this goes back to 1980, so it's a very long-term chart. Those are the periods when the Federal Reserve was tightening money, raising interest rates, taking liquidity out of the financial system. And in each case, when they began that process, they ended up causing a recession. So they have two tools to raise interest rates: stop buying bonds. Not only stop buying them, they could actually start selling bonds into the financial markets. And selling, of course, is never helpful to the markets going up. And the challenge is that both of these instruments, raising rates and stopping or selling securities into the markets, are very blunt instruments. They do not have an artist's touch when it comes to controlling or influencing the economy. So there's a real risk, and the financial markets recently have been expressing that risk with the volatility day to day, pretty substantial, that the Federal Reserve will raise interest rates to the point where the economy slows down fairly dramatically, or that they start withdrawing liquidity from the financial markets by selling bonds, and they create financial stress somewhere in the credit markets. You may remember that was what happened back in 2008. They won't repeat that mistake, but it's not a delicate process. So the odds favor over the next 18 months that the Federal Reserve, who is scheduled to start raising interest rates in March and is projected to raise them 4 times this year, and actually an additional 3 times next year, that there's some likelihood the financial markets will begin to fear that they will follow history and they will raise interest rates to the point where we actually have the economy not only slowing down, but contracting, which a recession is normally considered 2 quarters, 6 months of a contracting economy. That's what's happened every time they have started to raise interest rates in the past. So once they start this time, the odds favor, doesn't mean it absolutely will happen, but the odds favor that they will raise rates to the point where the economy slows, eventually stalls, and eventually contracts. We could go to the next slide. However, it's important for long-term investors to keep all this in context. If you look at this graphic, this again is the same time period, it goes back to 1980. And the blue bars that are rising vertically are the years with positive returns on the stock market. And there are a few years, 2008 most notably, where the blue bar falls and drops. But most of the years, we get positive returns from the financial markets. The black dots are really important and interesting. That is the intra-year decline for each year. And you'll see that the dotted line reflects that the average intra-year decline is about 14%. So far this year, I think our maximum decline, at least in the broad market, is about 11%. So we haven't even hit the average yet. What I'm suggesting is over the next 18 months, we're likely to see the black dot fall more than the average. But what's important to remember is that as a long-term investor, the economy and the market recovers. Don't leave the financial markets. Just understand what's going on, stick with it, and persist as a long-term investor. That's how you will be successful. We could go to the last slide. This brings me to the dominant investment theme over the next decade, transforming the global economy to a decarbonized, sustainable environment. This transformation will require huge amounts of capital. Whether you're talking about transportation, whether you're talking about real estate, whether you're talking about the garment industry, the fashion industry, doesn't matter what industry you are part of, there is going to be a major transformation. McKinsey expects that we will be spending an additional $3.5 trillion a year to transform the global economy. That's like PPP and all the stimulus money every single year being spent to transform our economy. There are going to be substantial investment opportunities. There already are within the realm of transforming our economy to decarbonize and reform the way our economy functions. Those opportunities exist in the public markets, both on the equity side and on the bond side. I encourage you to learn about those opportunities, to think about them, whether you are investing in your own business through digitizing or energy efficiency, or simply a remote workforce that reduces the carbon footprint of your company. Those changes are going to create very substantial investment opportunities moving forward. And that spending of $3.5 trillion a year is projected to continue until at least 2050. This is not a short-term phenomenon. So in the article, I described that there are various ways to participate in this, and certainly the Colony Group has a lot of expertise helping our clients consider and allocate their capital to really take advantage from an investment perspective of the transformation of our economy. That investment capital is critical to us successfully decarbonizing our economy. It's not going to be government money. It's not government policy. It's private capital. It's private business that's going to make the change in our environment and in our economic growth. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marshall. And Marshall, if you own your own business, Marshall co-wrote a book with two of his co-workers, John Weeks and Jim Fitz, about preparing to sell your business. And it's great reading and good for business owners. I want to shift now from money to education. Education is changing, and education has been affected by three pretty big issues. One, of course, the pandemic, major demographic shifts in New Hampshire, and also competitive challenges that are emerging. And to give us a glimpse into what these disruptions may mean for you and your future workforce is Dr. Mark Rubenstein, Chancellor of the Community College System of New Hampshire. Please welcome Mark.
Good morning, and thank you for being here. If we could move to the first slide. Thank you, Judy. Could there be a more iconic image that captures New Hampshire's economic history? Massive brick buildings, the Mill Yard, the Amoskeag Building, Pandora. The Merrimack River driving the textile manufacturers and other industries of the early industrial age in this country, and now transformed into high technology, Akamai, Autodesk, Oracle Dime, Army, DECA. But for a minute, I want you to ignore the brick buildings. What I really want you to focus on is the river, and more importantly, the bridge. And if the bridge doesn't look familiar, not to worry, you haven't missed any major construction in Manchester during the pandemic. What you're actually seeing there is the McGregor Bridge. It's a postcard image from 1911 of a bridge that actually was washed out by a flood in 1936, later to be replaced by the Notre Dame Bridge and then the Bridge Street Bridge. And the reason I want to draw your attention to that is, as much as anything else, that is the role that post-secondary education is going to play in the future of New Hampshire and really nationally. What you heard Mr. Rowe describe a moment ago, McKinsey's finding regarding the transformation, the investment in the economy, that is what post-secondary education is going to be about. Now, I will tell you that the folks who built those buildings and the original occupants of those buildings probably couldn't have envisioned what industries and what technology would be in place 100, 150 years later. And I'm not visionary enough to tell you what it's going to be in 20 or 30 years from now. But I do know a little bit about New Hampshire's present and about the future that we face. A lot of this is going to be shaped by demographics. Recent census findings, New Hampshire gradually, slowly becoming a more diverse state. But two of the most pronounced trends, the age of this state. We're the second oldest by median age, neighbored by Maine and Vermont. And we're a slow growing state. And that has a lot of implications for workforce needs in New Hampshire. Part of it is simply the volume. We were sub 3% unemployment for the 4 years before the pandemic, and we're there again. Finding talent to fuel the economy. And because we're an aging state and a slow growing state, that creates real challenges in a number of ways. Succession planning. We have in every occupation, every industry virtually that will still be here in a decade or 2 decades, we need to replenish the workforce. New Hampshire's an entrepreneurial and creative state. We'll have new technologies, we'll have new industries that don't even exist or don't currently exist. Where was regenerative medicine 20 years ago, and what is it likely to be 20 years from now, and what's going to be the next great breakthrough? So all of that puts a lot of pressure for the state to find talent. And of course, that in turn creates challenges for post-secondary education. We need to have programs that support students growing into those roles that are currently available and those roles that we can't yet envision. So that's part of the bridge analogy, the bridge of opportunity for students, individuals now where they are, to the workforce opportunities that exist and the ones in the future. But there's another dimension to this, and it really has to do not with the endpoints, the destinations of the bridge, but where the bridges begin. Normally we think of college, and for a lot of us, the thought is it's high school and then it's college. It's a steady progression. I would tell you that one of the most important things to know about the future of post-secondary education is that it's not going to be serving only the roughly 15,000 high school graduates, but more importantly, it's going to be serving tens of thousands of working adults who are going to participate in the transformation of the economy, who have to retool as the shelf life of knowledge, as their own personal circumstances change. As the economy changes, new industries come in, industries leave. We've got to reinvent ourselves to be ready to do that. So that's part of the challenge in the future of post-secondary education, is being prepared for that transformation, not just preparing individuals for the first opportunity, but actually the recurring reinvestment in themselves, and for employers, reinvestment in the workforce. Judy, if I could trouble you to move to the next slide. Apparently McKinsey is going to get a lot of play today. This is actually a chart from McKinsey, 2019. And I apologize, it's a little bit difficult to read, virtually impossible. But what this is looking at is a midpoint estimate of displacement of work by automation by 2030, not the distant horizon, but 10 years out. So Judy, if you could do the first overlay on that slide, please, make this a little bit more visible. What this slide is really capturing are two things: that there are a significant number of jobs that are going to be lost. If you summed all of the small circles, what you would have seen is a total of about 40 million jobs across the country. And as you can see by the legend on the right, disproportionate impact felt by those in occupations or in industries that have the least post-secondary education, least likely to be in college. So one of the things that we know is that automation is going to have an impact. I'll give it a local example. Some of you will know Commissioner Caswell. BEA is going to be issuing grants shortly that will introduce automation into restaurants and other small businesses to try and address some of the frontline work that can't currently be filled by people because the restaurants and other employers can't find staff. So I don't want you to think that this is too much science fiction, but taken to that large level, 40 million jobs, roughly 1/4 of the national workforce. Now, I'm not here to sow seeds of panic. I will tell you that 40 million jobs sounds like a lot. It's a quarter of the workforce, but we've been living with industrialization, automation for 2 centuries. And the workforce has grown. And part of that's because the population has grown. The need for service, the need for goods has grown. But the real issue here is not that we're going to displace workers from jobs, but we're going to displace them from the jobs that they have. We've got to figure out what the new opportunities are, and we've got to give people the opportunity to transition into what those new roles will be. And again, the majority of participants in this are not going to just be the 18 and 19-year-old students coming out of college. They're going to be the working adults who reinvent themselves and prepare for the things that they want to do or need to do differently in the future. If we could move to the next slide, please. So, am I sending them back to classrooms? No, because this is about bridges and not about walls. So if you could please go to the overlay, since I'm on the 60-second clock at this point. If these slides, if what this shows you as you look at these, things that look like workplace, could be classroom. This is the future of post-secondary education, breaking down walls between employers and employment and education. We value what employers provide to their employees. We integrate that. We try and fill the gaps. And that really is part of the future of post-secondary education. More affordable, manageable, bite-sized pieces that fit into the lives of working adults and allow them to be successful in getting the next step forward, and over time accumulating that into the degrees they need for the portability and the opportunities beyond. So I want to thank you for your time and wish you well.
Great, thank you so much, Mark. That was informative, and for those of us looking for employees, it's another way to think differently about retaining employees. Our next speaker is actually going to be beamed in from Florida, and can I just say we're all jealous? But seriously, marketing is yet another business tool that is evolving rapidly. Making sure that your business is seen by prospective customers is always a challenge. I'd like to ask you to turn to the screen and welcome Jeff Eisenberg. He's president and CEO of EVR Advertising, and he promises to give us marketing advice for 2022. Please welcome Jeff.
Hi, everyone. Well, first of all, I wish I could be there. This has been something that's been on my schedule for quite a while. And if I can just whine a little bit, a Florida wine, it's only like 52 degrees down here. So it's not, I know, but it's not 14, but I'll be back tonight and I'll suffer with you guys. So 8 minutes to distill marketing down to something that's meaningful for you. So what I thought about when I was preparing to talk today is if I can give you some takeaways that you can go back to your place of work and implement, that's the most useful thing I could do for you. So what I've done is prepare some thoughts about the state of the art of marketing and advertising. The things that I'm going to be talking about are either trends or are impacted by trends. But what you'll hear is a lot of them are traditional approaches to marketing that we just have to adapt to in our modern era. So perhaps some of these things can end up on your New Year's resolution list to go back to your. We're probably dealing with people in the room that are some that are marketing savvy. Some might rather go to the dentist. I don't know who's in the room in terms of your orientation, but there is something that you can either act upon yourself or go back and talk to your people about. Number one, the funnel. We've always talked about the sales funnel. It's still there, starting with getting people into the top of the funnel, which is awareness, moving them into that middle of the funnel where that's interest and intent, to conversion and advocacy. The difference today is that it's so measurable. We live in a digital world. We're going to talk about that a little bit in the next few minutes. And so that while we've always talked about getting people into the funnel, even back to the direct mail days when we used to measure direct mail response, and there's always been that funnel. However, today we're quite aware of where we have our consumers entering into that funnel and how we step them along. That's an important concept to kind of start with. Data. I use this term data abundance. There's obviously so much data available. Data privacy. So data abundance and data privacy is a huge factor in what we do today. We are headed toward a cookieless world. In other words, if you've heard of that term, the practice of putting tracking mechanisms in our search patterns and our web traffic is going to go away eventually. However, there will be still ways to track consumers in a contextual way. So if they know that I'm interested in golf equipment, they can match me up with products that might appeal to me. So be aware of data, be aware of the fact that we're going to have to convert our world to collecting our own data. We're going to have to use that data to personalize, and we must use that data to measure and optimize. And by the way, while I don't have slides, I am going to be sending out a post talk document that will be distributed to you to recap these thoughts. Number three, multi-channel, omni-channel presence. We know that campaigns that use multiple channels have a 300% higher purchase rate than single channels. So we all know we had limited resources. We can do anything, but we can't do everything. So the trick in this multi-channel, multi-content platform world is to understand your audience, understand where they are, build a plan that has numbers and data associated with it, so that when you are on these multiple channels, you can revisit the campaign as it's going on and determine what's working and what's not. Measure and attribute. Data. We must measure what we do, what our activity is, and understand where our investment is best served in a multi-platform environment. You can do that. There are ways to measure. And be consistent. Be consistent. When we're across a lot of platforms, the danger can be that our voice changes, the way that we treat customer changes. The more consistent we are across those platforms, the more effective our marketing will be. Start with search. Search, in the work we do, we almost always start with paid search and organic search, SEO, as the first first channel that we deal with because it's low hanging fruit. 70% of all traffic on the web comes from search. 90% of consumers start their purchase search with search engine marketing. So make a commitment to go back to your place of business and understand how effective is our search. Are we being found? And maximize the opportunity is there. You'd be surprised how often people don't do that. That's your advantage. That's your opportunity, because the ones who do this best are going to win. Look into the keywords that your staff is or your service is using. Optimize landing pages, because whenever you have a search, the click is made, and you want to reward that person with saying, I know who you are, I know what you're looking for, and here it is. Don't send them to a website where they're going to be lost and it doesn't acknowledge what they're looking for. Give them a landing page that acknowledges their topic that they're interested in. Help them in that customer journey. Number 5, content. Content is king. At our agency, we talk about content with a capital C these days, because content is so multifaceted. It could be blogs, it could be articles, it could be podcasts, it could be made for social content, but it has to be the core platform. After the website, you have to have content that is going to engage your consumers, your visitors, and move them down that funnel, because the way you're going to get them from brand awareness to interest and to interfacing with you is going to be engaging content. A good approach to content is find something that would be your what we call cornerstone content. You might produce a blog, and from that you can produce all kinds of little snippets and content. Make sure you're committing to something that produces a volume of content that you can use across your marketing. And last but not least, video. 72% of customers prefer learning about a product on video. 88% of users spend more time on websites with video. So if you've been thinking about how to break into video, don't be afraid to fail. Make small projects. Don't be afraid to find some champions in your organization to go around, use an iPhone, get started with video. It is very, very, very powerful. It's a subset of content. And the longer we delay in using video, the longer it hurts our business. So that is 6 takeaways that hopefully will help you stir your mind on how we can do a better job of marketing in 2022. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm not sure if you can hear the applause, but we're giving you applause right now. So thank you so much, Jeff. I was shocked when I heard that our next guest is retiring in March, because frankly, she looks just too young. But I was telling her I have a nephew who's an actuary who says the younger you retire, actually, the longer you live. So before she leaves, she wants to help us understand something critical about healthcare. While the healthcare system in the US is the best in the world at treating sickness, we're not always so good at preventing it. So please applaud and welcome Lisa Girton. She's president of Anthem Blue Cross and Blue Shield in New Hampshire, and she's going to talk to us about healthcare.
Thank you very much. 6 weeks, but who's counting? So I'm so happy to be here today, and I'm going to start with a bold statement of the obvious, and that is that healthcare moves fast, even when you're not being influenced by a pandemic, unlike anything any of us have ever seen. And I was recently asked to be part of a discussion about what healthcare will look like in 25 years, which I found a bit daunting because, like the Chancellor, I don't consider myself a futurist. Definitely don't have a crystal ball. So I'm grateful that we're here to talk about a more immediate view of the future. But I will say the research I did for that really underscored for me how easy it is to forget how much changes in a decade in healthcare. And, you know, I went back 2 decades and I saw that we had almost twice as many heart attack deaths or heart disease deaths because we didn't have statin drugs, clot busters. We didn't have the same level of understanding about prevention. Shockingly, in 1996, a 20-year-old newly diagnosed with HIV lived 3 to 5 years. And now HIV is a chronic but manageable condition with life expectancies of 70 or better. But though that 20-year-old will be on a cocktail of expensive drugs for the rest of their lives. So these are wonderful treatments, but with very real implications for the costs in our healthcare system. The human genome was just mapped in 2000, and that will change healthcare forever. And stem cell research, while controversial, opens a door to creating replacement parts. In fact, I read that there are 6 different organs being grown in the laboratory right now, which I thought was amazing until a panelist on this other event I mentioned said that they're actually working on building a kidney on a 3D laser printer. And that's when I said, okay, this is getting very science fiction. So with that as context, we can say that medical breakthroughs will certainly continue, and I'll leave the specifics of those to the scientists and clinicians. But our job in health insurance is to make sure that people have access to those treatments and that we can afford to pay for them. So what about the future healthcare payment and delivery system? How will we give people access to those things? And COVID has underscored what I want to start with, which is there's an evolution that we need in our healthcare system. There are challenges we need to overcome if you're going to be able to do that, if we're going to be able to do that for our companies and our families. And it involves 5 shifts that we're trying to do our part to enable and support. The first one is from fragmented to cohesive. And I think any of us who've had to use the healthcare delivery system extensively know how fragmented it can really feel. So health plans will play an increasingly important part in helping to architect care and providing value to the purchasers of health insurance and healthcare by connecting patients to the best resources for their personalized needs. That's already emerging. You can buy a high-performing network now. There are programs and incentives that help ensure that in the world today, but I think you'll see that as being increasingly important. The second shift is from complex to streamlined. There is just no denying the inherent complexity in healthcare. There are so many siloed stakeholders, siloed data, which is a big problem I'll talk about in a moment, disparate regulation at the state and federal levels. There is so much abundant opportunity to streamline, and it falls to us to try to lead the way in that. The third is from episodic to longitudinal. We have come a long way on understanding prevention, just as in the case of heart disease, but most of the care that you and I still receive is completely episodic and triggered by an acute event, and that is leaving a lot of opportunity on the table. The fourth one is from defensive to cost effective, because with explosions in new care options come price tags that most of us couldn't even imagine 10 years ago. So especially in the area of specialty drugs, it is not unusual at all to have a monthly treatment cost per patient of $65,000 or $90,000. Some of those drugs are for rare orphan diseases that aren't that common, but increasingly those kinds of treatments are available for autoimmune diseases like MS that are very common. So this is a very real cost pressure that you're already feeling in your benefit expense, and will only continue to grow. So the question is, where will this money come from? And the very first place we have to look is at the waste that we're paying for in our system. Non-evidence-based care, redundant care, duplicative care. And a big driver is frankly defensive medicine, care provided under an abundance of caution. So I think you need to look to your health insurer to ensure that there are programs in place to ensure the right care in the right setting at the right price. And it's very important that you understand how your health plan is doing that in the here and now, because these challenges will only grow as we go forward. And then the fifth shift is knocking on our door. It's here in no small part thanks to COVID. We are shifting already and need to further shift from an almost complete reliance on physical care to seamless integration across I'm sorry, I forgot you guys out there in virtual land. Hello. Seamless integration across modalities. So that's digital, virtual, and physical. With digital increasingly serving as the front door. And I don't mean that as a gatekeeper. I mean digital solutions that actually allow people to get diagnosis and care that they need. And then referral into virtual and physical care when the situation requires it. This is going to help with affordability, with access, equity, and simplicity. And health insurers have a major part to play in making these things available to you and to the people that work for you. So employers can really help with this by understanding what capabilities are available, educating about them, and encouraging their use. So if those are the shifts, what's going to enable the shifts? There are really two things that will drive this change that we're trying to really embrace, and that's data and AI. It is not hyperbole to say that we will see data and AI impacting every aspect of your healthcare and health insurance. Our data doubles every 80 days. And a commercial payer like us, especially one with the breadth and depth that we have, has to serve as an aggregator of that data. We have to use it to track patterns, detect trends, and give it to health professionals to help them apply insights and deliver more effective and personalized care. So this is happening already in the programs we have in place right here with our providers in our network in New Hampshire. But there's a next level opportunity, and it speaks to that siloed data that I mentioned at the beginning. The opportunity is to create a trusted, secure platform to facilitate data exchange across the entire healthcare sector. And in fact, Anthem is one of 7 Fortune 500 companies working together on a joint venture called the Health Unity Network that's designed to do exactly that, and specifically to use blockchain to create entirely new connectivity in medicine. This is one trend to watch, as I think this will be critically important if we're going to evolve the way we need to. AI is equally important and could honestly command a 2-hour presentation by itself. It's not the future, it's here, but I think you're going to see rapid expansion of how it's used throughout the whole spectrum of care delivery and operations and experiences. And it will influence everything from clinical decision-making, wearables that contain and combine with AI, symptom checking as part of that digital front door. So I would encourage you to look and see what's already out there. We have an application called Sydney, which brings these capabilities directly into the hands of our members. And in fact, when COVID first hit, we were able to quickly stand up a symptom checker using artificial intelligence to really help people understand what kind of care they needed. So if you think about the characteristics of the healthcare system that I noted as needing to evolve, that we're working on actively trying to evolve, I think it's really easy to see why AI is so important and how it can play a part in streamlining, simplifying, personalizing, and connecting. And that will affect the operational aspects of healthcare, whether in a hospital or an insurance company, where we can redesign processes and greatly simplify using AI. I want to underscore how much we'll begin to see more and more care delivery coming through digital and virtual modalities. And that's a good thing. So that's, again, system assessments that doctors can use before visits, so they're not starting cold. Symptom assessments right in the hands of patients, personalized content, text-based visits using AI. These are such important elements of how we can achieve this access, equity, and affordability that's so important. Health plans, I do believe, will, of course, still be here to provide the right benefit programs, and I think you'll see those begin to diversify into things like subscription price models, where a consumer can purchase access to a certain number of medical services, needs-based offerings in addition to the traditional offerings of today. But I want to underscore that health plans have a critical part to play as the world of treatment explodes in architecting and helping navigate care. And that's something you should absolutely expect from your insurance plan. Care has to be provided efficiently, cost effectively. We have to drive waste out of the system so that our nation's healthcare dollars can be used to provide access to these many life-saving and life-extending treatments and innovations that are in front of us that we don't even know about yet. And importantly, I'll close with the fact that while talking about AI and data might make healthcare and health insurance in the future sound very techy and impersonal, the application of these gives us the best opportunity we've ever had to actually make healthcare more personal, more proactive, more oriented toward prevention. So I think these are some of the most important themes and trends that you'll begin to see emerge. And I would just encourage you to understand what's available in the here and now that can help you provide the best benefits at the best cost and on an affordable basis going forward. So thank you so much for your time and attention. And it's great to be here with you today.
Thank you so much, Lisa. When you said 65,000, but when I think of how many people we know that survive cancer and heart disease alone, it's amazing. Our next speaker asks a simple question. Why are you putting out tech fires when you should be spending your time doing the things that give you joy? I love that. So let's please welcome to the stage Dan Bergeron, a founding partner of the firm SkyTerra in Nashua. Dan?
Thank you, Heidi, and thank you, Business New Hampshire Magazine, for allowing us to speak and be part of such a great group. And I've heard a lot so far that really goes along with what we do as an organization. So it was interesting when I was first brought on to talk about technology. I thought, well, it's interesting. My organization, although we do a lot of cloud technologies, we don't push technology, which is why my article wrote about that. So I said, well, let me look at what we see in our space. So we've been around for about 7 years. And we look at all of our customers and like, what is the underlying theme? Because we've been very successful. We have 150 customers across North America. We have, there's a common theme amongst all of them. And it really has to do with, reducing the amount of technology or specializing on certain technologies. And with COVID, we saw our customers who worked with us prior to COVID do just that. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how they've been successful, and it kind of mirrors what we've done. We eat our own dog. It's interesting. Most of you probably never heard of SkyTerra. However, we'll go through this in a moment, but we're Microsoft's largest cloud solution provider in the Northeast by far. Yet we're 30 people. We're also New Hampshire's second largest MSP, and we'll probably be the largest MSP in the state by the end of the year. So, with that said, what I'd like to do is just go through a little bit how we're doing things and what inspired us, and then just and see if you guys can resonate to that and help your organizations grow as well. So. That said, so we started in 2015. Most of us actually came from the enterprise. You're going to hear a little bit about that in a moment. But what we really do is we work with customers and figuring out their pragmatic journey to the cloud for the most part. We don't concentrate as much on-prem. It's just a legacy thing, which was very fortunate for COVID, because when COVID ended up happening, the first month was relatively quiet for us. And we were like, what's going on here? We've got so many customers did not say anything. So we started calling up, and they were all telling us they were very well positioned for COVID because we had brought them to the cloud already. They had the tools in place to expand and let their people work from home, just like we were working from home. But we started getting more into phone systems and video and everything else, and moving some of their on-prem stuff into the cloud. And now that they're getting rid of their offices and moving their servers, and we're doing other things in that area. But it all started with this concept of reducing the technology footprint in organizations, which is different than traditional VARs, where they push technology for technology's sake. So the other thing is we're also, we were built for the cloud. Our employees were working in the cloud. They were all working remotely before COVID. The interesting turn of events for us was actually during COVID, a lot of the employees wanted to come home. I come back to the office because their families were now home and they didn't know how to work So they were nagging them and doing all these and disrupting them. So we had a lot of employees coming back and saying, hey, can we come into the office for a couple of days because we need to get away. So that was actually pretty cool difference in our organization on how technology works. So with that said, I'd like to talk about what inspired us to become this type of a company, to really learn from the past. And if you want to go to the next slide, please, that'd be great. So the future is really hidden in our past. So I'm here to talk about the future in technology, but what we did is most of our roots, I actually made the Boulos. This is my first time doing an event like this for you guys. So unfortunately, gonna have to walk through the spaces a few times. We're an organization who about a third of us came from this company called Wellington Management, which also has roots of not marketing much, not having much of a sales force, trying to be a very private company who grows on their success and not on marketing. They actually had a marketing firm when I was there for 17 years, where they purposely tried to stay out of the press. What was interesting is my first week there back in 1995, we had a quarterly meeting, and Mr. Dorn, who was the CEO at the time, came out and said, he had a room similar to this, probably with about 100 people in it. The company was about 270 people at the time, and says, well, this is our first quarterly meeting that we're really segmenting off the IT group because we're just getting too big. But there's another difference, is that you guys are going to be the largest part of the organization at some point. Although we're a financial services company, we can only hire so many smart people. Because you can only hire so many investors who are from Harvard, Yale, Oxford, et cetera. And everybody in the room was like, what, are we stupid? But what he was trying to say, was a little tongue in cheek, was that the company was going to start investing in technology to start supporting these investors. So we listened earlier from the Tolany group, the graphics and everything. Well, those investors have technicians and technology to help them, give them that data so that they can grow bigger and get more information. And same thing with the healthcare space, where they're talking about doing more in AI and everything else. So they were a little ahead of their time back in 95, because when I left in 2012, there was about 2,400 employees and 70% of the company was IT. But yet they were a very large investment firm. And I think they managed about half as much as Fidelity at the time in that same division, with a fifth of the people. So that really inspired us to do more with less. But fast forward with them a little bit, their IT staff is going down because they're using the cloud and the ability to use the cloud. So we're taking that type of mindset and we're adapting it to our customers as well. And we've been doing it for 7 years, which is why we're fairly successful. Lessen the complexity of what your organizations are doing. And you can take small businesses that are 20, 50 people and have them compete against the big Fortune 100 companies, because they can use the same tools as the larger organizations are working with. So with that said, I want to go through a couple of things of how you can look at your organization and do something very similar. So don't lose focus on what your organization does well, right? Find the right people in your organization, like the investors, and provide them the right tools and the right resources that they need. And things constantly change, right? So invest in, what you need to do is invest in tools that can adapt and change to do what they need to do. And then, look at those people and hire the best ones that can focus on the business that you have. And what we're finding is as we're moving into this more centralized technology stack, we're taking on more of the burden of the organization. And we're doing this for, very large firms across the world in all sorts of verticals, and it's very consistent. And then, the end result, we always talk about doing more with less, but that's what we have, and that's what occurs. Can you go to the last slide, please? So everybody else asked us how do we future-proof ourselves? So what we've actually done ourselves is we've start launch another company that gets into AI, IoT, and analytics. And with that, we are future-proofing ourselves, but it's a separate company because we don't want to lose focus on what we do well. So I see other organizations doing similar things, and I'm happy to talk to people if they want to chat further, because we think our model has worked well, and what we find with our customer base is really that we try to encourage them to do more and do more with what they do best, and we work together and we grow together. So thank you everybody for your time.
Thank you so much, Dan. SkyTerra is actually a past best company to work for in New Hampshire also. And we're going to be opening up that competition in the next month or so. So we actually brought the best companies edition from 2021. So if businesses are interested in participating in that, that's coming up soon. So many businesses in New Hampshire are asking, with a 2.9% unemployment rate, how does a company fill open positions? Our next speaker recommends thinking a little bit differently about both recruiting as well as employee retention. Please welcome Peg O'Brien. She is a director at McLane Middleton law firm and a member of the firm's employment law practice group. Peg?
I was asked to come here to predict the future, which is always a risky endeavor. And like Lisa, I have no crystal ball. I do have a magic 8-ball though. It's right next to my computer at home. And in 2021, every morning I asked it, should I move my investments out of the stock market today? And every day it said no. But one day last week, I said, same old question, should I move my investments out of the stock market? And it said, you're too late. And that's why you have to think about the future, and maybe call Marshall too. Because all of us, you got to think about the future, and all of us are in our jobs thinking about the future in one way or another. I spend a lot of my time every day helping employers with employment law issues. Where, sometimes, what is that decision going to look like in the future to you? And I've been thinking about, so what are the kinds of questions I might be asked in the next 12 months? So here's where I see things going. For the next year, it would appear we will continue to have an ongoing tight labor market. And it's always tight here in New Hampshire. That's nothing new. But when have we ever seen the numbers this tight? I mean, in some parts of the state, it's less than 2%. And I'm not an expert. I don't know exactly why we're at this point. I'm just with you all in the trenches dealing with it as this tight labor market impacts employee hiring, retention, and sometimes overall business operations. So how do you employers address this issue? Well, you definitely need to continue to listen to the demands of your workplace's employees, because staying static is definitely not an option. You need to evolve. I've been saying real time evolution, like that pesky little COVID virus has done, right? It was the original, then it was Delta, now it's Omicron, and all these variations. Kathleen referred it to as adaptability, but it's the same concept, is that things are moving fast, and you need to be thinking through how are you addressing it with your employees in your workplace. I'm just going to highlight 3 specific ways that you might consider it in the future, in the coming year. For one thing, it turns out that employers are finding employees want more and more remote work from home. When the virus first started, we all went home and worked from home on an ad hoc basis. Now we're 2 years into it, and many employees who used to go into the office every day, now they still want to work from home, and they're actually very productive working from home. Working from home, or WFH, as I see it now written, is no longer contingent on a public health crisis. It's just another way of working. It is here to stay. And I anticipate more and more employees are going to request it. More and more companies are going to need to offer it. And you're going to have to adopt written policies on it. there's many aspects to that policy. So you really want to have it thought through and be prepared that you're providing the best option for your employees. And work from home might be an end run around the labor market, right? Because you won't be tied to the New Hampshire market. Maybe automation is going to be your end run, but right now I think that remote work might be able to help you. And a related issue to remote work is flexibility in work schedules. When the pandemic first started back here in New Hampshire in March 2020, I had several clients, mainly manufacturers, who were essential workplaces, had to continue working, and they modified their work schedules to avoid cluster outbreaks of COVID in their workplace. And I had one client who it's been 2 years in, and she has actually adopted that COVID modification. So now they have a standard 4-day work week, 10 hours a day. And as I understand it, the employees love having Fridays off. I know I would love having Fridays off. A variation on that is a 980 schedule. You may not know that. I know BAE has that. It's basically every other Friday you have off. And so when it comes across my desk, I'm usually monitoring for wage and hour compliance issues, just helping companies, achieve those employee friendly, responding to the needs of what their employees are looking for. Of course, a second topic I anticipate I will see coming across my desk and speaking with employers about in the next 12 months. And I actually was speaking to them about it before the pandemic, but that's health and wellness issues for employees, which on my desk, unfortunately, looks just the opposite, right? It's employees who aren't appearing healthy, who aren't appearing well. And so there are related performance or disciplinary issues. And I understand during the pandemic, my conversations with HR are different. Employees are extremely stressed. Before the pandemic, I never had employees stomp out of workplaces or make demands on that especially edgy tone. And now there's just an undercurrent of stress. And I've always said to employees, you do have employees in your workplace 40 hours a week. That's a lot of time. So thinking about how to accommodate and support them should be part of your culture and rhythm and flow. And frequently it's just a little extra compassion, which I know so many of you here in New Hampshire offer, but that compassion is usually just really simple, a few extra minutes with an employee talking through issues. Sometimes it's adopting an EAP program, Employee Assistance Program, which in 2022, many workplaces have. But what I've learned from my clients is that it also helps to train employees on how to use it. Because when the crisis happens, there's no time for education, but employees don't actually know how to use that tool. So sometimes letting them know, hey, it's okay to reach out and use EAP. Everybody needs sometimes a little extra support, and that's fine. And really it's conversations, sometimes just simple conversations make all the difference in somebody's health and well-being. And then I would just add that enhancing your paid time off, giving people a little time away from the workplace can go a long way. And what's interesting, in the last couple of years, I've actually had clients ask me to modify their PTO policies to either require or strongly encourage employees to take at least 1 week off or 2 weeks off, because there are a lot of employees who are just workaholics and they don't take that time away from work, and you want to support that. And my final prediction is that I believe that employers will continue to need to augment their financial terms for employees at all levels, which I know was already going on in New Hampshire, but it used to be old school. Many employees received an hourly rate and that was it. And then they were also sometimes told, no moonlighting, no side jobs. We need you fresh and ready for this work. Well, those days are long gone. Everybody has a side job. Everybody has a gig. So you need to anticipate that and what that's going to look like. And then the work compensation terms are much different. There are some just regular hourly rates, but there are also more complicated bonus terms, not just annual, but quarterly. There's also profit sharing, phantom and shadow stock options. ESOPs are very common nowadays. And as I mentioned, everybody has a side gig. So you have to think through, how are you going to manage that conflict? The last slide talks about some bigger issues, and I'll just wrap up that when you have a Democrat in the White House, rule of thumb is there's increased enforcement action by different agencies. And that's definitely true. My prediction is that you're going to see more enforcement action by OSHA and by the NLRB or union activity. I'm already seeing both of those. So the issue is that what do you do with that prediction? Well, when those forces, when those agencies are union in your workplace, it's already too late. So you need to think through, okay, what will I need to do to address that? I'll just give you one example. Handbooks came up in response to collective bargaining agreements, right? The unions gave employees these nice little binders of their rights with a little spiral, and they put them in their pockets. And handbooks came out because employers said, wait a second, you've got all these benefits here. Let me put them in a little packet and give them to you. So educating your employees, making sure they know what your benefits are is one step, and thinking through on safety. You know, OSHA has mandated employers, you have to think about how to provide a safe workplace. Make sure you've got your ducks in a row on safety protocols before OSHA shows up. And then also just, there will be new guidance issued on New Hampshire paid family and medical leave. It's a voluntary option. I predict it's going to come out in June, so you will want to take a look at that because that is a benefit you want to think through for your employees. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Peg. One of the things when I'm speaking at an event, I always find like I'm so stressed out before I get up to speak that I'm not a very good listener leading up to that. So I feel badly if my other speakers are afflicted with that same disorder. But I'd like, you know, there are many things going on in Washington, and many of those things that are going on in Washington, of course, can affect how businesses are taxed. So here to enlighten us as to what's most likely to happen in the year ahead is the Senior Director of PriceWaterhouseCoopers. Please welcome Andy McWilliam. Andy.
Good morning, everybody. Nothing like, I know it's a quiet group, nothing like a little discussion of tax reform to get everybody's blood flowing in the morning. I know the other observation I've had so far is after listening to Lisa's remarks about heart disease, I'm going home right after this and putting all the whiskey and cigars in the trash. So I appreciate that, Lisa. So tax reform, and as many of you know, there's been a significant level of activity throughout 2021. I'll get to the punchline as to what I think is going to happen in 2022 in just a few minutes. But again, significant level of activity. And let me take a step back. Tax reform generally comes out of a couple of different places. If you remember back in 2017, shortly after President Trump took office, the Tax Act and the Tax Cuts and Job Act of 2017 was passed that significantly affected the tax code and was focused primarily or solely on tax reform. So that's one way that tax reform occurs. There's a bill that's put forward whose primary focus is tax legislation, and we had that 4 years ago. Another example is what was proposed coming out of one of the new pieces of legislation in 2021 that President Biden took up to the Hill. As you recall, there were two significant pieces of legislation that he and his administration put forward. One was the infrastructure bill, which did pass both houses of Congress. That bill and the funding for it was not affected by or was not contemplated to be funded by increases either to corporate or individual tax rates. The second bill, the Build Back Better bill, and you'll see, I apologize for the detail in the slides. And again, a lot of this, and this is moving pretty rapidly, and I'll get to that in a moment as well. But this talks about some of the provisions of Build Back Better, but really what I want to focus on is sort of where we've been over the last few months and likely where we're headed. So as I said, Build Back Better was brought to the Hill, as you know. This started out from a spending perspective as $3, $4, $5 trillion of spending. It was negotiated down to a little bit below $2 billion as the Democrats and Republicans got together and put together something that they felt had a chance of bipartisan support. The bill covered topics like child tax credit extension, universal pre-K, climate, healthcare, among others. The bill did pass the House narrowly, given the Democratic majority in the House, and that vote fell exclusively along party lines. It was then brought forward to the Senate in December, and initially the expectation was that there would be considerable negotiation, and most likely that would continue on into 2022. Then Joe Manchin came along. And not necessarily came along, but as many of you know, Democratic senator from West Virginia, and he's taken a very vocal stand from a Democrat perspective, which again was not in line with his party's thinking. He had grave concerns over the level of spending in this bill, and the level of spending from the perspective of there were both proposed spending measures, which I just described. There were also proposed individual and corporate tax increases that were going to be used to fulfill those spending commitments. And his view was, if you pass the bill and the tax increases go into effect, those are in effect forever. Okay. The spending that was in the bill in many cases had very short-term provisions to it, so that they weren't going to extend for many years. And again, you had this dichotomy of tax increases that were going to be there in perpetuity, and spending that while it was scheduled to end in a relatively short period of time, his concern was that typically these programs don't end that way, that they continue to be legislatively renewed, and that the spending over time would far outpace any tax increases or any of the monies that tax increases would bring in, and therefore our deficit would rise significantly. And you know, he took a very principled stand on that. Again, as most of us have seen from time to time, he's probably of anyone in 2021, or he's certainly at the top of the list of somebody that now has a newfound popularity that he probably wasn't looking for. But at any rate, the sum substance of all that is that this bill has now stalled in the Senate. And frankly, our view is in its current form is DOA, most likely. So what does that mean? As we look to 2022, we all know that we have midterm elections that are going to take place in November. Again, the prevailing thinking is that the Democrats have a very good chance of losing both the House and the Senate. And obviously their attention at some point here is going to turn very quickly from this legislation, as well as the filibuster and some of the other things that they're talking about in DC, to getting back home and campaigning and trying to save their seat. So our view broadly is that if this doesn't happen by the end of April, it's unlikely to happen at all. And there's probably 4 likely scenarios that ultimately will affect tax reform. One of them is there may be a smaller bill that comes out of this, that the 1.8 trillion gets shrunk down to something smaller, but still includes all the provisions that I mentioned earlier. They could break it up into chunks. The progressive left really would like to move forward with the climate piece of this. So you may see a carve out and then have them try to move that forward to a Senate vote. They may, through the annual appropriations process, try to get some of this passed and funded through, I don't want to call it a backdoor provision, but a different provision than the one that's currently contemplated. Or, as I mentioned, there may not be a deal at all. So again, the punchline to this, and I think it's good news for everybody in the audience, frankly, unless people were looking forward to paying more taxes, either at the corporate or individual level, I think it's very unlikely that we're going to see any increases. The increases that are proposed currently in Build Back Better affect primarily large corporations and high net worth individuals. That there is one provision that, to the extent that you're an S corporation shareholder, there's a proposed, I think it's 3.5, 3.8% surtax on your S Corp earnings over a certain adjusted gross income amount. I think that's probably, for the people in this room and that are watching remotely, probably the most significant provision. But again, I think the likelihood of this moving forward is pretty remote. So again, thank you for your time and attention, and take care.
Thank you so much, Andy. That was great. And not boring at all, actually, fascinating. So our next speaker is being beamed in remotely. Our medical system has faced unprecedented challenges. I feel like I've said that about almost every sector we've talked about today. But here to explain what's going to be happening in healthcare in hospitals moving forward is Dr. Joanne Conroy. She's CEO and president of Dartmouth-Hitchcock Medical Center. And if you could please turn to the screen, Dr. Conroy, you're on.
So there are a lot of things that are going to affect healthcare, but I want to focus on three that will dramatically change. Number one, how we deliver care. Number two, how we work. And number three, how we develop our workforce. Let's first talk about how we deliver care. You know, I used to call it a simple strand of RNA, but it's actually long and a kind of a complicated strand of RNA that is part of the coronavirus, has actually changed how we deliver care more than billions of dollars in venture capital over the last 10 years. We had to jump into telehealth within 2 weeks of the pandemic so we could continue to deliver care. And we were not alone. Every single health system across the country figured out how to deliver care remotely. This is not going to go away. Currently, 25% of our visits are still delivered virtually. And that proportion will only increase. You may ask why, but if you think about millennials that want their care to be more convenient, working parents that cannot always leave their job in order to take their child to the doctor, and certainly geriatric patients that are homebound or people that live in rural communities, using virtual care actually creates a level of access that they have not had previously. Now, I can tell you that in our behavioral health segment, close to 80% of our care is still delivered virtually. And it's a satisfier for patients of all ages to actually receive those consultations in the privacy of their own home rather than in a physician's office. You know, I would say that this is something that takes a village with government policies as well as state policies to actually allow us to expand this, but this certainly will benefit every single citizen in the state of New Hampshire. The second aspect that will change significantly is how we work. And I know a previous speaker talked about remote work, but remote work is here to stay. We currently have 2,500 employees that are permanently remote. They are the most engaged and probably the most productive of all of our employees. I think there's some concerns that we still have to answer about how do you supervise remote employees? How do you create a sense of culture? How do you engage them in their organization? But we're going to have to figure that out. I have to say, with 2,500 employees working remote, we have plenty of parking at Dartmouth-Hitchcock. We've been able to liberate office space, and we've been able to rethink how we actually measure the output of an individual's contribution to the workplace. It's no longer time in a chair, giving face time in the office. It is actually what they do. And for many of our supervisors, they had to rethink how they were going to measure that productivity. I think finally, it is our workforce that's changing. Now, our workforce now comes from over 35 states because we have remote work. We're an employer in 35 states. That actually allows us to really expand to a national workforce in a state where we have chronically low unemployment statistics. And that creates challenges for every single business leader in the room. But we have to do things differently for this new workforce. They're more diverse. Many of them are millennials. They want different work schedules. They have different expectations of what it means to be on a team. They're much more focused on inclusion and belonging. And in fact, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging are some of the top priorities for our new workforce. We are going to have to look at our schedules. 12-hour shifts were kind of the mainstay of our nursing workforce. Not all of our young millennial nurses want to work 12-hour shifts. They want to have some flexible schedules. And we're going to have to figure out how we do this within a constrained environment. I'd have to say that hospitals and healthcare systems didn't used to like part-time labor. We have to start to love part-time labor and repatriate a lot of our nurses and other healthcare professionals back into the workforce, because we are going to need them as our country and our state ages in order to deliver that care that needs to be patient-facing. I don't see any of these as insurmountable challenges, but they will change how we think about our organizational structure and how we think about our workforce and how we think about how we create access for patients across the communities we serve. Thank you very much for allowing me to participate. And it's been fascinating to hear all the other presenters.
And now I want to talk about our next speaker. Recently came to New Hampshire, but he's not really new to New Hampshire, that he knows this and has known New Hampshire for many years. But he has the unwieldy task of making sure our lights stay on. So please welcome Doug Foley, the new president of New Hampshire operations for Eversource. Doug?
Everybody, thank you for the invite. Looking forward to the opportunity of sharing some of the things that we're doing to keep the lights on every day. In fact, this morning was very busy. If you woke up this morning, the forecast is that we're going to have a blizzard and a number of inches of snow and the wind increase. So we do our planning days before the arrival and position external crews to prepare them. So when the snow does come in or the weather threat, we're positioned well to respond quickly. We heard a lot of discussion about working from home in this COVID pandemic time. And one of the things that we do every day, and we take real serious, is the reliability and resiliency of both our distribution and transmission infrastructure. Yeah, thank you. In our industry, well, let me ask you this. You're probably the only two times you think of your electric company is when you're opening your bill or when you flip on the switch and the lights are not there. So behind the scenes, we like to make sure that both of those events are enjoyable. But my team is focused in on monitoring the system and making sure that we keep the lights on. We do the work and the maintenance that we need to do to ensure the power is flowing for industry and for those that are working at home. And when the lights do go out, to respond as quickly as possible to get them back on, and then share with our customers information in regards to that outage and when they can expect to get the lights back on. And in the industry, we measure that frequency of outage we measure it months between interruptions. In about 6 years, New Hampshire, our customers were experiencing about an outage every 9 months. And through some investments, which I'll highlight in a few minutes, we're able to increase that performance almost up to 18 months per interruption on average per customer, which is a huge improvement. We've doubled that. It's first quartile in our industry, and we're very proud of that. New Hampshire being the second most farthest state in the nation other than Maine, 60% of our outages are a result of a tree limb come down and taking down some of the equipment on our right-of-ways. Every day we have about 100 contract tree trimming crews working on our infrastructure. Last year, we trimmed about 2,600 miles of distribution line. We have on-site arborists. We work closely with the municipalities to make do a responsible trim. But that trimming is important to make sure when we do have a storm, that infrastructure stays on and continues to provide power to our customers. The other investments that we make is routine maintenance. We have a robust pole inspection program, we replace pole, equipment, hardware. With new technologies, we do have wire that's tree resistant. So if a tree limb does fall down, it doesn't damage the wire. And then most recently, over the last 6 or 7 years, we're invested in smart switches or automated switches. So our dispatchers and our operations centers have real-time visibility on power flows and any trouble that may be on the distribution system. And using technology, we're able to switch around that particular issue and then dispatch one of our resources that are on the property to make those repairs quickly, and then also provide the information that our customers need to make choices, during that short period outage that they're experiencing. 3 points I want to talk about is our employees. We're in the communities that we work and serve. We're about 1,100 employees strong that live and work here in New Hampshire that provide the services to our 540,000 customers in the 211 communities we serve. And those employees last year, even during pandemic time, we participated in 37 community events in the state of New Hampshire, donated to many charitable organizations over $500,000. And those volunteers did events that totaled about 7,300 hours worth of volunteer activities last year. In regards to our customers, hopefully you're all familiar with our website, German Storms. If you did need information about your particular outage, I'd like to, point you to our website for that information. We've made enhancements for the customer experience where you can use you can go to the website, you can use your app, you can view your bill, you can pay your bill, you can check on your outage, you can report an outage. So we've been evolving with time because I think, through the Amazon experience, I think all our customers expect a different level of service. We all do, because we get it from other service providers. And we are building the workforce of the future. We heard lots of conversations about partnering with the community college. We have a proud program with Manchester Community College for our line workers. We've partnered with them. They have a program where they attract and we hire students that go through a line program that we help design. And when they complete that program, we hire them as line workers here in New Hampshire, and their training continues for the next 4 years as an apprentice. That's one of the programs that we're doing to make sure that we can hire and attract talent for the future at Eversource. We're working closely with University of New Hampshire on a co-op and an intern program to bring in juniors into our company to work on all the different disciplines, again, as a way to attract and retain folks in the state of New Hampshire. And then another program that we're very proud of, we call the Eversource Academy. It's a partnership with St. A's, but our employees are working with Manchester High School students. And we have courses and workshops on things like resume writing and interview skills, and also different technology classes. And it's part of that community involvement that I spoke about earlier, is we're giving these opportunities for our employees and the time to get out and get in the high schools and work and tell our story to the next generation. Moving on to clean energy, one interesting thing in New England, we share a common electric market and a common electric system. And 5 out of the 6 states in New England have committed to reducing their carbon emissions by 80% by the year 2050. And because of that, we're involved in the conversation and have several projects going on through many of the states in New England. One we're very proud of is our partnership with Ørsted. We're in the process of developing and constructing up to 700 megawatts of wind power off the coast of Martha's Vineyard. We just recently got approvals for the project South Fork off of Long Island. That's going to be beginning construction. It's the first one in the region. And we're doing other type of technologies in and around the New England area. We're in the process of commissioning our first battery storage project that, and that technology will continue to evolve, but that battery storage technology allows us to not build other right-of-ways or new substations in order to feed that particular load. In-house, Eversource, we're committed to be carbon-free by 2030. And one of the programs we're doing, and you may have seen some of our crews working out in the field, well, we have a lot of hybrid bucket trucks, which are diesel in nature, but the crews on site maintaining and working up in the air for our customers, it's all battery operated. They don't need to run the diesel motors, which reduce our carbon footprint. So with that, there's many other programs that we're working on. I appreciate the time and look forward to continuing the conversation about clean energy future here in New Hampshire. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doug. And now, many businesses were upended as a result of the pandemic, but one that was kind of at the forefront of their disruption is commercial real estate. And our offices are in downtown Manchester, and I can tell in my commute how many fewer people are coming in to work in offices. So to tell us about what that means for 2022 and what's going to be transformative is Drew Sigfridson. He is the managing director for real estate, or the real estate firm, the Boulos Company. Please welcome Drew.
Thanks, Heidi. Good morning. It's always a good idea, I think, to just completely go off script based on my prepared remarks. So that I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going last, and so during this whole time, I'm just scribbling all kinds of notes about what I want to mention. So maybe just a couple of high-level things. One is many of you might not be familiar with the Boulos Company. We actually had been affiliated with CBRE for many years, and we're glad to be now back in Manchester. We had a team of 4 folks just join us. We're headquartered in Portland, Maine. We have an office in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and now an office in Manchester, New Hampshire. So just from a high level perspective, COVID has had a significant impact in so many industries, as we've heard today. When you think about Maine and New Hampshire, we've actually been somewhat beneficiaries of COVID. So a couple of stats. In 2020, Maine was the 3rd highest state for in-migration of people moving to Maine. Number 4 was New Hampshire. Just out of curiosity, number 1 was Idaho, and number 2 was North Carolina, number 5 was Alabama. I don't know where Alabama came from. But so that was in 2020. In 2021, Maine and New Hampshire still reduced somewhat, just out of the top 10, but they were still really in like the top 25 percentile. So earlier we've heard about Maine and New Hampshire being aging states, not having sufficient workforce, needing people to move here. It's happening finally. And so we haven't yet seen all of the effects of what this will bring, but it's going to be significant. Just in Maine alone in 2020, there were 35,000 people that moved there. Maine has a population of about 1.3 million. I think New Hampshire is around 1.2 million. Most of those people that are moving to the populous counties. And they're big states. And so when you think about these people moving to the core markets of Portsmouth, Manchester, Concord, moving to Portland, moving to York County, those sorts of things, it's going to be a really impressive and transformative situation to our demographics. So with that as the backdrop, I just wanted to touch base on a couple of other things. For the sectors, I'm going to be speaking mostly about the office sector, but I just want to touch base on a couple of the other sectors in commercial real estate. So for the residential markets, unprecedented growth. in terms of valuations. Most people own single-family homes. You've probably seen the increase in valuations for your homes in the past, year or so, north of 30% increase, year-over-year increase. It's amazing. The demand for multifamily apartments, we have sub 5% vacancy rates, really in most markets. In many of the most high demand markets, we're under 1%, 2% vacancy. And the demand for these units and the increased pricing in these units just continues to really go through the roof. So developers are trying to scramble very quickly, find parcels of land, permit them, approve them, get them constructed. The interest rates are still incredibly low. The demand is incredibly high. You can't have it all. Right now, construction costs are through the roof in all sectors as well. So that's a problem, but we're still seeing new construction coming forward. So that's in the residential markets. In the industrial market, there's many factors at play here. So supply chain issues, we're seeing more manufacturers, distributors want to have onshoring. They want to be close to their customers. So the demand for distribution space, manufacturing space, light flex space, again, through the roof. We've seen lease rates that were 3 years ago, on average, let's say $6 a square foot triple net. We're doing leases now at $10 and $12 a square foot triple net. Just to think about a 50% or a doubling, essentially, in 3 years. It's amazing. Similarly, we have a 5% or less vacancy rate. If the demand is through the roof, developers are scrambling to, again, find good industrial land, permit, approve, and construct new. Hospitality sector, we thought that this sector was going to, really struggle for a decade. We thought this 2 years ago when travel completely stopped, hotels were vacant, they were having significant issues. Again, Maine and New Hampshire, two of the top tourist states in the country for the last 2 years. So PPP money, we talked about earlier, really saved these industries. And now we're seeing developers interested again in building new hotels. Retail market, bricks and mortar is still going to be there for the long term. Amazon has certainly transformed the way that consumers buy, but bricks and mortar retail is here and it's not going away. We still have very, very strong retail numbers. So now pivoting a little bit to office, and actually Dan Bergeron touched on this, and I really like to hear it. People need to be in the office. He was talking about, people being frustrated sometimes at being at home and you've got the dog barking and you want to do the laundry and the kids are there. And I also need to work today. So I think that the office market is going to be here for the long term and be here to stay. And we're hearing that from our clients. They have said about a year ago, they said there was a lot of uncertainty. They didn't know if they needed to be giving up space or not. Most recently, they've said, okay, work from home models, hybrid models are here to stay. We're going to adjust our internal office layouts and programming, provide flexibility to our employees, and allow them to work 1, 2, 3 days at home, and then come in and work in the office and have that flexibility. It's a really tight labor market. Nobody wants to lose their employees. Employees want flexibility, and employers are going to give it to them. So we have a lot of survey data that we've conducted over the last 2 years. I don't have a lot of time to go through it right now, but in essence, the survey respondents have said that they don't plan on changing the size of their office. They still need the same footprints that they have now. For more information, feel free to go on our website, boulos.com, and check out all the survey results. Thanks so much and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Drew. I am just fascinated, but I was completely surprised when you said lease prices have gone up. That's not good for those of us who lease, but when's my renewal? Now we're going to ask, I don't have a lot of time for questions, but we're going to ask a couple of questions. I'm going to start with Jeff Eisenberg, if he is still on. And Jeff, what is the biggest mistake you see businesses making in their marketing strategies? Jeff?
You want them alphabetically? Just kidding. Well, let's see. We have so many mistakes that we all make to choose from. I'm going to go with not maintaining a consistent presence in marketing for whatever reason. Certainly, we have highs and lows in our budgeting for marketing, but marketing is not something you turn it on and off like a light. So I think the biggest mistake I would see is companies who don't make a consistent commitment to having a marketing presence at all times, and not just when you think you need it, or having it be the first thing you turn off when budgets are tight.
Perfect. Thank you, Jeff. That's a great question. And then I am going to go to Joanne Conroy, who's also remote. And I just want to ask Joanne, the pandemic has strained the mental health of many, but mental health resources are diminishing in New Hampshire. What role do hospitals play in mental, in the growing needs of mental health?
You know, as the only academic medical center in the state, we are investing a tremendous amount of resources to actually train more behavioral health providers, and that's social workers, that's psychologists, that's advanced nurse practitioners that have a subspecialty in psychiatry, as well as attracting psychiatrists to the state. Behavioral health will be delivered as in kind of a team concept, and it'll be delivered differently. As I said before, close to 80% of our visits are virtual. And a virtual visit, from a reimbursement perspective is, 50 minutes, but frankly, a lot of patients need a text, an email, a brief phone call in order to kind of maintain their behavioral health. I think there are many things we have to do about how we construct the care team, but actually how we change the delivery and reimbursement system to make sure that we're giving patients what they need when they need it. As an employer, behavioral health is one of my top issues, trying to actually make a greater array of services available to my employees. And I am using virtual health till the cows come home to reach them.
Thank you so much. My next question is for Kathleen Reardon from the New Hampshire Center for Nonprofits. And Kathleen, for many small businesses, charitable giving is a luxury and there are limited resources. What can a small business do to have the greatest impact?
So thank you for the question. I think that there are a lot of things that small businesses can do to contribute. I think a lot of times nonprofits, in addition to financial support, are looking to access the skills of your employees. That could be by serving on the board of the organization, or perhaps a special project. I know that oftentimes nonprofits may not be able to invest as much in marketing or technology and those kinds of things, where some of your employees could offer some assistance. So that may be one way. Of course, getting your employees involved is another way to leverage what they can do. And I'll just plug again that the Center's project of New Hampshire Gives, because the whole idea about New Hampshire Gives is that all of us working together, small donations add up. And so, there are ways for you to, certainly, just even promote a particular organization. You may have channels with your customers that you can say, hey, we're supporting this organization. You could support it as well. So I think, it's being creative and thinking about how what resources you have to bring to bear.
Okay, thank you very much. And I think this is going to be my last question, but it's going to be for Andy McWilliam from PwC. So the national debt has been a problem for at least 6 years, and the person that asked this question can't remember how far back it really started becoming a big problem without any remedies in sight. But would beefing up the IRS assuage that debt at all?
Well, some of the proposals to increase funding to the IRS were part of Build Back Better, and that was part of what the Biden administration had hoped would ultimately help to fund some of the spending. The Congressional Budget Office said, and I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but the increased enforcement efforts by the IRS, it was somewhere in the $300 or $400 billion level over that multi-year period of time. So, while that certainly is a significant amount of money, it's frankly a drop in the bucket when it comes to the level of the national debt and deficit. So again, it would be helpful according to the CBO, but again, I don't think it's going to make any real wholesale impact.
Okay, and so we have run out of time. I regret that we couldn't ask everyone, but just to note that we do give the questions to our editor-in-chief, and they often are the fodder for future articles in Business New Hampshire Magazine. I want to thank the audience, that you intrepid people who made it out here today in the cold. And I want to thank our webinar audience. Thank you so much. Many of you worked in offices with COVID outbreaks, so I know beaming in virtually was the only way you could join us. And I want to thank our great presenters today who gave us a lot to think about. Thank you and have a great day.